Okay, now hopefully you've watched some of the earlier schedules so you can see. If you haven't, please watch the 6th grade schedule because it will show you the basics of how we fill this in. I'm going to do one that's specific for 8th grade because it is a little bit different where 8th grade has a 5th major. So you've got your 4 majors. This is a cohort A schedule. I've got my 4 majors, live in person or live remote for the remote academy. And I'm going to go ahead and write them in. English with Miss Evans, Social Studies with Mr. O'Brien, Science, I have Mr. Mahoney, and Math with Mr. Sturdivant. Notice that it doesn't rotate, so I'm just going to go ahead and write this in too. I would take the time to do it neatly if I were you, and I would take the time to write my teacher's name in all of those. Take the time now, and then you won't have any room for questions later. Okay, block 5. It's empty because for the most part that's going to be a lunch block. There might be some classes in there on some people's schedules. Block 6 is Spanish. All right, so this is when you're going to get your world language at some point in the afternoon. And it is going to be a live, although remote, class. So I need to make sure I write down that I have Senorita Palermo because I need to make sure that it's her Google Meet code that I'm looking at. So that's block 6. Block 7 is an open block. So I go down to my asynchronous and I copy up that I have art with Miss Asher and I have phys ed with Mr. Freeman. All right, now what I'm going to do now is color code it. So if I'm remote, these are remote live classes and I would mark them as such. If I'm hybrid, these would be live in-person classes, and whatever your system is, I would do that. These are remote live classes, remote live classes, and these are asynchronous remote work coming up. Okay, so again, if I'm remote academy, I might, I would do the same system whether I outline in orange or whatever. Okay, asynchronous day, you're going to get work as an 8th grader. You get asynchronous work from all 5 majors: English, math, social studies, science, and world language. And you're going to have some that are due in the morning so that we can do an attendance check, some that are due in late morning so that we know you're still at home working, and some in the afternoon so that we know that you are working through the full school day. You want to make sure that you're doing that, submitting your work. Some teachers will let you submit it early, but we just want to make sure that we can say to the state that we know we've given you a full day's education so that you're ready to advance to the high school. Make sure you get credit for that so that we're not dealing with something at the end of the year. On Thursday and Friday, you've got your live remote specials, which really isn't, this one isn't that it's a special, it's a live remote major. That one's blank, so I'm going to copy whatever happens first in my X row. I'm just going to check it off so that I know I've done it. Math with Mr. Sturdivant. Okay, so then I've got my next, I go back up to block 3 and I've got my art. That's my next special. I've got this one blank, so I go down to my Y row. I've got English with Miss Evans. Block 5, I've got PE, Mr. Freeman. Block 6 and 7, I'm going to be getting work with social studies. Having a live Google Meet with social studies, and then one with science. Right, so those are all set. So now these carry straight over: Spanish, art, PE. Again, make sure you write in your teacher name. Just saving a step here. And then I go down to my X row to fill in the blanks. So X row is social studies, that goes into the first. Science is second, it's in the Y row. Science. And make sure you write in your teacher name so that you know whose classroom to look at. Okay, then I look at my 6 and my 7. I've got English, I've got math, teacher names. So my X rows, these are async, async. My specials, live, live. And then over these 2 days, I see my 2 majors. I see 4 of my majors, and I will have already seen my 5th major. Okay, so that's a basic introduction to a cohort schedule for 8th grade in cohort A. I'm just going to jump in and do cohort B at the same time. Okay, so this is good. I'm getting a good rotation here because here I've got French, cohort B. I make sure I have the cohort B sheet. I do French, with Madame Cortez. I've got 2 blanks, so I go down to my X row. I've got social studies with Mr. Ritland. I've got science. I've got a break, then I've got science with Miss HM. Okay? And I checked them off because I copied them over. Now I go back up, I've got block 4, RL4. Block 4, I've got Phys, Ed, Mr. Freeman. I've got band, Mr. Cornello as my music choice. Okay? So I've got French, I've got phys ed, I've got band, I fill both those in. My block 6 and 7, I've got English, Ms. Heckman, and I've got math, Mr. Boynton. All right, so I started this, copying this over, but then it got confusing. So French, and then I got blanks. So I go down to my X row, and I carry it straight up. Math. Mr. B. English goes into block 3 with Mrs. Heckman. Then I've got phys ed, which makes sense because that doesn't rotate, and I've got band again. So those will be live remote classes. I'll log on. In the afternoon, I should have my other 2 majors, which I do. I've got social studies with Miss Ritland. I've got science with Miss Achen. All right, and this is good too because the sample that I found is a remote schedule. So for the remote academy, you can see that it is no different. The only difference will be whether the Thursday and Friday morning are spent actually in the school or just continuing to do live remote classes, but you're still going to be getting, it's the same schedule and it all fits the same rotation. Wednesday, you get asynchronous work from all 5 majors: science, math, English, social studies, and French. And the teachers will tell you when everything is due, staggered throughout that day. Jumping to Thursday, I have my 4 majors. I have 4 of my majors in the morning. The world language one is going to be the one that always comes later. Asian, science, math, Mr. B, English, Mrs. Heckman, social studies, I guess I should write that out. Social studies, Mrs. Ritland. Okay, block 5, I've got a dismissal break, lunch break. Some support classes will be scheduled during that time, but if it's blank, you can just leave it blank. In the afternoon, block 6, I have French. Make sure that you check which block it's in, because that could also be block 7. Right, so that's going to be with Miss Cortez, and then special from that day, I'm going to pull up from the Y column, just because it's the first one that's populated, is Mr. Cornella's band class. The next day, I have French at the same time, but I have the other special, which is PE, with Mr. Freeman. Up here, you can see the classes don't rotate, so I've got science, I've got math, I've got ELA, and I have social studies. And those, again, write them neatly, write the teachers' names. If you have a Google Meet code, maybe put that in there, so that when you sit down, you can open up your schedule and know exactly where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be. Okay? And then I would go through and color code that accordingly too. All right, if you have any questions as you're filling this out, you can contact your guidance counselor, and your homeroom teacher should also be able to help you with that as well.